listening to Get Yourself the Job with Jennifer Hill and Brandon Maslan, only on LA Talk Radio.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us here today for Get Yourself the Job on LA Talk Radio. I am Jennifer K. Hill, and you are here with myself and Brandon Maslan. And in a moment, we will introduce you to our fabulous guest today as we finish up this special series that we've been doing since the beginning of January on everything that you need to know to land your dream job in 2021. Before we do that, though, I want to take a moment and thank our sponsors, the people over at Markham Search LLC. Markham Search offers premier professional recruiting services throughout the United States, and they also offer services including temporary placement, executive search, and payrolling services. So please do keep them in mind for all of your recruitment needs. And today, I'm very excited that we're going to have a friend of Brandon's, Mike, join us today. So Brandon, since you know him better, I'm going to let you make the formal introduction.
Yeah, I feel like Mike's introduced me more times than I've introduced Mike, so he's the expert, as I like to describe. I'll never need a marketing department as long as I know Mike Myles. But Mike he's a friend. You're right. He's probably the first person who ever taught me that a client that I work with can truly become a friend, and that's become now a pattern in my work where I start as a client and they become dear friends. So it's a gift. Because I hold friendship so seriously. Let me read Mike's bio, and I'll geek out a little bit on who he is as a man at the end here. This is from me and Mike were part of a combined initiative called Consciously Studios, which was a bunch of creatives trying to bring more beneficial and positive content into the world. So Mike is a strategic and creative ally in the world of entertainment. His passion for creating quality content led him to grow and oversee the video department at CBS.com or Survivor, Big Brother, Amazing Race. Then his work brought him to The Good Wife, Big Bang Theory. I was just talking to someone. Every time the word Grammys comes up, I think of Mike, or working on the Grammys and a lot of other things that are too much to list here. Mike is an avid surfer. He took me surfing. I didn't get up, but it was fun to sit in the water with him. He's a great cyclist, podcast enthusiast. I just love that that's on there, Mike. And then, so let me just get personal for a second. Mike was the first ever podcast guest I ever had, Jennifer, on the show I had with Gurian called, what did we call it? Unmasking Your Fear. And Mike was a great guest then. He's just a great friend, a great person. There's an entire principle of coaching that I base on Mike Myles, which is called Make Better. We have a mutual friend, Scott Aceto, and we say MBM for shorthand, Mike Make Better Myles. Everyone who's ever known him loves him, and I don't say that loosely, but more importantly, everyone who's ever worked with him values him. So I'm going to have Mike talk Mike talk about a lot of things. I just said a lot of words really quickly, so now I'm faster.
Just sitting here, Brandon, like feeling a little like embarrassed because I'm not used to that kind of description about me, but it's like, thank you for all those generous words, and I'm so grateful and appreciative, and thank you both for having me on today.
Yeah, MBM. Jennifer, I know Mike for years, and we've probably talked, I don't know, give it 300 hours, so I'll have you start because I know him way too well.
Well, Mike, we
can cover a lot of ground or a little ground or go wherever you want to go. I'm here.
I was just telling somebody about this on the interview earlier. I have no idea what is going to come out of my mouth. When the camera starts rolling, I'm just like, okay, universe, whatever questions are meant to come out, I have no say on it. And I typically watch an interview. I'm like, wow, we talked about that. That's good to know. So on that note, Mike, let's see, what is the first question that we have for you today? Because of the fact that we've been going on this journey of exploring everything that people need to know from A to Z about landing their dream job, I think one of the most overlooked aspects of your job search is staying too long, is overstaying your welcome. We've all been there. I'm not just talking about your job search. Often we tie in relationships, personal, professional, romantic. This is meant to be, applicable to all of you in life. Yes, we talk about getting your job, but this is really a bigger conversation about how do you live a life you love. And so, Mike, if you could start by perhaps sharing with us, how is it that at least for yourself, I know you can't speak for the rest of the world, that maybe you've outgrown a position, or maybe you've outgrown a company, or maybe you've just outgrown the boss that you're working with. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. I think that's a great jumping off point. And it actually kind of touches upon how I came to know Brandon and work with him as my coach. And I think that I think it's very easy to do. And I think it's very, very hard to spot. And my last job was at a major network, and I was there for about 12 years. And I had so many wins and experiences that I'm incredibly proud of. And it was probably the last couple years I don't know. I guess looking back on it now, it just wasn't doing it for me. And how that showed up, I felt like I was having to, the best way to describe it is, I felt like I was having to twist myself into a pretzel more and more to make myself work in that environment. Meaning not just to accomplish the things that I was accomplishing before, but to continue accomplishing and having those same wins. It was just feeling harder and harder. And some of it was corporate and cultural changes that were taking place. But over the course of those 12 years, I had 12 different bosses. So it wasn't that I was, I hadn't experienced change before. I think I was changing. But I think that that's really, really hard to spot, especially if you've been in a place for a while. Maybe a little easier if you haven't been in a place for a very long time. But if you've been in a place for a while and you've done things that you like and you're grateful for, it's kind of a slow change maybe it's a slow change in the environment, but maybe it's a slow change in you, or maybe it's both. So it's not sometimes so easy to spot. And I remember having this feeling. First, it was probably a year and a half of just feeling exhausted and feeling like no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't get back the feeling that I felt years before. I started working on my resume. I kept looking back at my resume, and I hadn't worked on my resume in 12 years. I was like, I know this guy's smart, but I don't feel like it shows up on the page here. I was having this conversation with my amazing and supportive wife, who belongs to a group called Advancing Women Executives, and Brandon worked a lot with that organization for a long time. And she had met Brandon and said, I just met this coach, and maybe you should talk to him. And I'd never, I was 49. I'd never talked to a career coach before. The thought of it did not feel like, something I really wanted to do. I thought maybe I would have one call with Brandon and we would talk about some strategies. And that one call turned into several months. And I think Brandon, what I learned from that experience was, I think Brandon probably saw it from call number one. I did not see it, because when you're living life up close, face to face with all your problems and all your challenges and everything, you're managing people and making sure they're happy and making sure you're hitting deadlines. You're thinking about all those things, and you don't get that chance to really step back and objectively look at where you are and if you're happy. But Brandon put me through a series of branding exercises, corporate branding exercises, which really I thought would be easy. I thought we would check those boxes off within a couple of weeks. I think it took me 3 months, because it's really hard to look at yourself objectively and look at your career trajectory objectively. And out of that 3 months, kind of realized where I was at. And within 30 seconds of that conversation with Brandon, he said, well, did you always wanted to be that guy? And I realized I'd kind of become the cleanup guy. Mm-hmm. And it was breaking my heart, and it was just slowly eroding my soul. And Brandon's one question to me was, did you always want to be the cleanup guy? And within 30 seconds, it took me 3 months to realize I had become the cleanup guy at my company. Within 30 seconds, I blurted out, I always wanted to be the make things better guy.
So that's a great jumping off point, Mike, because that is, how so many people know you, describe you, and define you. Something else you talked about though was that energy, right? And that being de-energized in a job. It's one of the things I'm always listening to as a coach, and I'm sure Jen did too in her careers. People get really good at lying to themselves, or at least saying the words that they perceive themselves as, or they think other people want to hear. And what I sort of have always attuned to, even as a lawyer, was you don't believe them. That statement's making you sad. And the second that someone says something like just now, where you go, this is who I was, to make better, it's that energetic shift. But that's why branding work doesn't work in a day. It might work in a day, but it takes maybe a year to believe it, or 2 years to believe it. It's actually the exercise isn't necessarily the thing. It's the getting words down to describe ourselves not as we were, but as we are, and as we are going to be. So Jennifer, any thoughts on what Mike said?
Yeah. So what's there for me, Mike, is I understand your journey. Sometimes it feels uncomfortable. Like we see ourselves in one light and we become very fixated on who we think we are in the world until somebody actually comes up to us, like a Brandon or whomever it might be, and they reflect back to us the blind spots, the shadow that's behind us, or the thing that we didn't even realize is how we occur to other people. And what I think the gift is of having a Brandon in your life, whoever that might be, it might be your best friend, it might be your spouse, it might be a professional coach. And it's to allow yourself to receive the feedback. And what I love that you shared so vulnerably, Mike, is that you talked about, hey, it took you 3 months. I think that's the important thing for people to understand is, one of my teachers said, if you do something out of fear, like sometimes those of us, I know I've been there myself in the past. I once quit a job because they wouldn't give me 2 weeks off to go to Paris. Shocker. I was 20 yeyears old and that's how it kind of all started. But I've made those reactive job moves before where it's like, oh, I don't like you. And, you do it out of fear and not from a place of love. And what I really respect and admire is that you took the time to reflect. I would encourage everybody out there, before you ever consider making any huge adjustment in your life, it could be a new job, it could be, a new relationship, a new home, whatever it is, ask yourself, am I doing this out of fear or am I doing it out of love? Because if you're doing it out of a place of love and expansiveness and growth, then you're going to have the capacity to step into who you're meant to be. But if you're doing it from a place of fear or lack or uncertainty, it's not the right time. It's time for you to pause, to talk to more coaches, friends, mentors, or spend time by yourself. You can often figure this stuff out yourself. Get curious and ask questions. So that's what I got from what you shared, Mike.
Yeah, I looking back on it now and having a little distance, like I think it's really easy, and I think it happens more often than not, and I think it's a very slow process of falling out of alignment, and I do think it's very, very easy, and I think it's very hard to do on your own, to look in that mirror, I kind of look at, in this case, Brandon, but a coach is kind of being a sparring partner a little bit to kind of flex those muscles, challenge your thinking, and kind of work out in a gym a little bit to it wasn't always, a walk through the park with Brandon, meaning he would ask me tough questions. And it was funny because I would talk about these things with my wife too. And she's like, well, we can talk about these things. I'd rather work with somebody that I can fire if he really pisses me off and says something I don't like, which he did on many occasions. And of course I never fired him and we've become great friends, but hearing it from your spouse is sometimes different. I want her to love and support me. And it's harder to hear hard things from the people you love than it is from a stranger, but not in this case. Brandon's turned out to be a great Brandon, has held that mirror up to me. And what I've learned is that I think it's very easy for any one of us to drift out of alignment. I don't think it speaks to anyone's capabilities or talent or how awesome you are. I think it happens slowly over time because life gets complicated, either with kids or family or jobs or a pandemic. So I'm sensitive to that now, and I realize it's very fragile, and we can all drift out of alignment.
Thanks for saying that, Mike. Because Mike, if you don't mind muting, we'll Sorry,
Yeah.
we're working on all of our audio things. Thank you, brother, man. I can only say I've never been able to tell a guest like do that, but it's like this is what happens when you're talking to someone you've known forever. 3 things I love, and Mike is my inspiration for all things analogies. I have a thing for Mike where it's like shoot the gap, because he was basically just about an Olympic cyclist, and this idea in our life that when we're in the zone, it's almost like being in a bike race, and you can see 7 moves ahead. And that's the thing about Mike is that, don't never sleep on Mike Myles, or any leader like Mike Myles. They might seem mild, but they're the strongest people in the room, the smartest people in the room, and the best people in the room. And I think Mike is great at that. And I think because he was so easy to help other people rise, sometimes it's easier to let ourselves sink. And what I've seen with Mike over the last couple of years is as he's risen, all those ships rise as well. And so Mike is sort of like rocket fuel. Let's rockets lift off. I love your alignment analogy though, because it reminds me of like the Sid. Like you can just drift off, right? And it just comes slow. And the other thing that happens in my work so often, Jennifer, you might have seen this too, is one of the biggest wastes of time that I see is people have that, you mentioned you had that light switch that goes off, right? And then you know what they do immediately right after that? They go, I've wasted so much of my life. It's been 5-10 years. I can't believe. What is wrong with me? How did I not? I knew this, right? My spouse, my significant other has been saying this to me for 10 years. Why didn't I not listen? I'm sure my wife has that all the time. I know I have it with her. By the way, that's my wife. I'm like, you're a women executive. I do a lot of that kind of coaching. She goes, yeah, I'm not going to listen to you though. It's just fine. It's better to listen, actually. It's good spousal advice. The point of the story is this, Mike. It's such a waste of time. The reason we don't pivot, the reason we don't leave jobs so often is we don't want to feel that enormous pain that comes from the awareness that we've wasted our time or our life. That's why we stay in bad friendships, marriages, and jobs sometimes. It's because, oh my God, that realization comes with. And I just talked to a client right before this where it was, God, that short-term pain is so real, right? But if you can just get through that short-term, it is so much better on the other side. Jennifer, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that it's about trusting when things are working for your highest and best good. Like we all have our purpose and you feel out of alignment. Like if you ever, it's kind of like riding a wave. I know you were talking about surfing with Mike earlier, and I was lucky enough to learn how to surf when I was about 20 years old. And when you ride a wave, yes, there's a lot of paddling. This is kind of like job hunting. You're going out there and you're going over obstacles and there's these waves and they're crashing you down and you're trying to duck and dive under waves. And this is you crawling up the corporate ladder or whatever it is that your dream career is. And then finally you get to this peaceful state and you're like, oh, okay, it's kind of cool. Now I just get to wait out here and wait for the right next wave to ride in. Now, sometimes as a surfer, you can sit out there and you can be waiting for the perfect wave for a while. Because the funny thing is, sometimes other people catch the wave you want and you get jealous and you're looking at them and you're like, that was my wave. How dare you catch that wave? And it's like there's this whole surfer etiquette thing. But that's life. Sometimes somebody else is going to catch the wave you want. Sometimes somebody else is going to get that job. But guess what? You're going to have an opportunity to have the ride you're meant to have and to trust it. And then, yes, guess what? When you go back out there, you got to swim and you got to swim. My shoulders were like ripped. I remember when I was surfing every Sunday in La Jolla, I would go out there and I was like, whoa, is that me in the mirror? Because it takes so much strength. So the thing you have to prepare for is that, yes, when you job hunt, when you leave a job, it takes strength. But the peace, when you're just at peace, waiting for that next wave to come in. And when you ride that wave, the direction it's going, there's this sense of oneness and unity and everything flowing in your ease. And then at one point, you're going to fall off the wave. And it might be a 30-second wave or a 2-minute wave. And that's not the point. The point is to enjoy the wave. And that wave is the job, however long you're on it. I have no idea where that analogy just came.
It's great. Jennifer, I call you out when you're off. That was amazing. I know Myles is geeking out on that. I'm geeking out on that. That was amazing. Don't do that thing where you get to the end of the wave that you rode a perfect wave and go, oh, that was brilliant and beautiful. I texted you while you were talking so that you could remember you were going to have the ride you were meant to have. That's some good ass words there. So heart, my friend. And you got to a core of something that me and Mike actually talked about earlier when we were catching up, which is I use a gym metaphor. When you're stuck in the wrong job, it's like the gym. Use it to get in shape. Give it meaning. If you can't get out because of mortgage or life or whatever, that doesn't mean you can't grow, right? We had a gym metaphor in our previous podcast, so we're on a theme. But the reality is I like actually that wave analogy really resonates for me because I didn't learn when I was younger, and I still have almost never stood up on a wave. And I thought Mike would be the one who got me up on one. But you know what happened? We sat for 2 hours. But you know what? For 2 hours, I sat with a good friend in the middle of an ocean. We're going to sit somewhere. It's COVID, right? Why not be in the middle of the ocean and sit and talk? I mean, it seemed as good a place as any. The point is, sometimes you just got to find what the bad environment can give you. But in the best case, you can figure out what the bad environment is doing for you to make you stronger. Mike, any thoughts on that? The gym metaphor, the brilliant surfing metaphor?
Yeah, I love the surfing metaphor, and I think it's spot on, and it applies to life and career and so many other things. That's why I love it so much. And there's that saying that it's been around for a while, but the best surfer in the water is the one having the most fun. And so if we apply it to what we're talking about here, it is about alignment, and that is the one having the most fun. And when I left my job, I'd never really not had a steady paycheck. Like, it was scary, and I had some great conversations with my wife, like, this is scary for me, and she's like, I believe in you, like, you're gonna, like, whatever. So I kind of embraced this, like, well, I don't know what my future is going to hold, but I know what it's not going to hold. And so I have to stick with the faith and the trust that if I just keep following my curiosity and passion, and the way I did that, it's going to lead me to the right place. And the way I did that is I looked at my resume and I looked at all these cool things that I'd done. And I knew that the through line of my story was that I've always followed my curiosity and my passion. And that if I just keep doing that, it'll never steer me wrong.
Boom.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Jennifer, go ahead.
You go right ahead, Brandon.
Well, I was going to ask him. It's kind of moving on here, which is, can you talk about it that fun? Because I do think, I love that comment. I just quoted it, texted it to Jennifer. I don't know what my future will hold, but I know what it will not hold. That resonates for me so much personally, because when I was pretty unhappy at some point at the first recruiting job I had in LA, my friends used to joke around. They knew how bad a day I was having by how big my hair got because I pull my hair, and then we get pretty big some days. But I would actually, and they would go, "You'd pace to the window." We were always terrified. Why is he staring out a window? But what I was doing was, I'd worked in my father and my grandfather's law firm, my grandfather started, my father took over, my grandfather and I was the third generation, and the office I had stared at a parking lot, and I would say to myself when I left that job, I will not spend my life looking at a parking lot. And what I was doing was I would get up and you could see the Pacific Ocean, the Hollywood sign, and almost all of LA. It was a really tall building in downtown Los Angeles. And I would go, and what I was actually doing was reminding myself, this is bad. That would be worse. I will never have that again. And I would then go back to my seat and work harder, right? It was the motivation I needed to be like, no. You're not there. Might not be where you want to be yet, but you're not there. And that actually got me more motivated. Jennifer, anything on that? Because I do want to ask him about some of the fun he had, because he's had a hell of a ride since he's left his sort of full-time steady gig.
Yeah, the last thing that's kind of a bizarre segue that just came to me that could be valuable for our listeners and our audience is several years ago, I was considering going through a divorce at the time. And I wasn't sure, like, talk about a transition. It's a big one. It's not one you take lightly. And, for anybody who's ever been out there for you, I feel it. It's not something that either party wants to go through. When you give your vows, you give your vows. And that's kind of how we feel. When we take the job, we don't think, oh, I'm going to leave this job in 6 months or whatever. We're thinking, oh, this is it. I finally found my purpose. And I remember I talked to one of my spiritual teachers who had also gone through a divorce. And I remember saying to him, Michael, please give me some wisdom. I don't know if it's right, if it's wrong, what I should do. Is it the right time to move on? And he kind of giggled. Michael Beckwith is just a hilarious guy, Reverend Michael Beckwith. And he said, he's like, Jennifer, he's like, it's only in Western cultures that we get so obsessed with this idea of being with one person for, the whole rest of our lives. And he said in many cultures, in certain parts of Africa, you sit down and when you sign your marriage contract, it's only 7 years. And then every 7 years, you sit down with the village elders and you look back on all the lessons that you've learned with your spouse. And you ask yourself, do I still have more lessons to learn with this person? And if you do, you sign another 7-year contract. If you don't, you lovingly part ways. And I share that as a job hunting analogy because what if we did that with any job that we ever left? What if instead of being reactive or being afraid or doing it because I need something bigger, better, shinier, what if at the end of it you looked at your boss or you looked at the organization and you asked yourself or even talked to a coach or a friend about it, have I learned the lessons that I needed to learn from this? And if you have, lovingly allow that job to go and embrace whatever's next. Who knows? Ride that wave. But it's just a great analogy that sometimes we get fixated on something being our purpose, our forever thing, whatever that thing is. And when we let go of the attachments to how we think something should look, that's where all of a sudden this expansiveness becomes available. And we can just thank that opportunity for the lessons it taught us, even if it wasn't our ideal job.
And I love that you said that, Jennifer, and not to make it too personal, but the stories you've told me over the years that you have some amazing, we could do a whole episode on lessons you've learned in life, in growth mindset, right? That I put in my little notebook is like, that's a great one. So many of them came after you met your prior husband. And I just think about that because so much of your growth happened post the meeting. So you were evolving and changing and becoming probably the you were always meant to be, right? And I always think about that. I think that's so interesting in relationships, right? Especially when you meet someone in high school or something and they go, well, it didn't work. Well, yeah, because you're not who you were at 16. No kidding, it didn't work. That's not to say there aren't some beautiful love stories that do, but you have to grow together. You have to grow together in the same direction. That's very hard to do. Most people don't do that, right? But I just want to honor how incredible it is for you to acknowledge your growth. And Trish, anything on that? I just think that's right powerful from a career perspective too. We grow in these jobs and then we outgrow the jobs or we grow differently than maybe the job is. Any thoughts, Jennifer, on that? Sorry, Mike, just
Yeah, it's what came to me, Brandon, is just trusting. It's really about trusting that the path you're on is the right path. And sometimes it's going to be uncomfortable. Sometimes you might get banged in the head with a surfboard. That's when I stopped surfing, by the way, because I got scared. And that's when we don't jump back on the surfboard or whatever it is. It's like, oh God, I got hit on the head or I went underwater and I didn't know which way was up. That's called life. And you know what you do? You paddle, you get up, you take a breath, and then you dive back down or you jump back on the board and you paddle again because that's life. We're going to get knocked down. We're going to get banged on the head, but it doesn't mean you're never going to go surfing again. It means that you get a chance to try it differently, to learn different styles, be like, oh, how could I have done that differently? And to bring curiosity. I think that's the thing about all of this is to ask, what is the lesson? What was this job? What was this boss trying to teach me? And so, Mike, I would ask you, what would you say was one of the greatest lessons that you had? You had all of these years and many people would look at you and say, oh, how cool that Mike got to work at, CBS. What were the lessons? Why do you think that was a part of your life for the time it was?
That is a great question. I got thrown into a lot of really cool circumstances, very challenging circumstances. I think, and the circumstances got bigger and bigger, and the stakes got higher and higher, and the budgets got bigger and bigger, which was all very exciting. And the pressure became higher and higher, which was also very exciting. I think for me, I started to develop a confidence that I could be that person, that I could handle that pressure, that stress, those budgets, the scale of the projects. So in that way, I'm very grateful for my time there because it did give me like bigger and bigger opportunities to be that guy in that role and even surprise myself some days, a lot of days. I think though I don't know. I could have just kept looking at all the external things around me and kept kind of trying to conform and twist myself into a pretzel to make it work because all the external things around me look pretty good, including my bank account. But it didn't reconcile with how I was feeling. And so I know there's lessons to be learned, and I appreciate all those things. But at a certain point, and it was about the time I met Brandon, it was really about me revisiting and realigning with myself, and deciding who I was and who I wanted to be going forward, and really leaning into that more, and letting the circumstances and my environment wrap around that instead of me wrapping around the environment. And to me, I think that that's still the key. I think that is the alignment. I think we can take the lessons that we learn from our environments, and I think that will never end. But I've certainly, even since CBS, like, walked away from some great opportunities because they don't align with me. And I walk away not with maybe a anxiety that I would have felt years ago, but like with a buoyancy, like, oh, good for them. They're doing it that way. I don't do things that way. And I'm going to go left. They're going to go right. I wish them well. And let's keep going ahead. So having that alignment gives me grounding. It gives me an anchor. It gives me reassurance. It gives me a confidence, not a cockiness, but a confidence. I can still stay humble. I can stay aligned to my true north. And I think that that's so important. And I do a lot of mentoring with young college students now who are, working towards working in the entertainment industry. And one of my biggest things that I'm trying to mentor is really kind of the work that I learned from Brandon. And that is, like, know who you are, know what your story is, stay aligned to that as closely as you can. Doesn't mean you can't take a job that's not perfectly aligned, because we all need to pay our bills. And sometimes a job is just a job, and maybe it doesn't align totally, but it's good for right now. It's the lily pad you need to stand on in this moment, particularly during a pandemic. But
Mike, and I like that you use buoyancy as well. I mean, we're staying on the theme here, but like that, there's when you pivot in your career, when you leave something, you almost feel joy when you get out of another thing in the future that would have been the same negative experience. That's true in life. It's true in friendships. It's true in dating. It's like once we learn a lesson, it's actually fun to practice that lesson. It's just so hard to learn it to begin with. The other thing that I think is important to mention is that when we get into these jobs, and the longer we stay, whether it's jobs or relationships, but jobs in this case, it's actually easier for the people that hired us or that knew us to see us as we were. They're not trying to harm us. It's just they see us as we were, right? But we're not. We've changed. And so we have two choices here. We can see ourselves through that lens, their lens. I call it the funhouse mirror, which is you're the short man or the fat man, the skinny man, right? It's distorted. Or you have to sometimes step out. I'm not saying get a coach. This can be a friend or a spouse or anyone who holds up a different mirror and goes, no, this is who you become. This is you. So it's actually hard. It's actually it's normative to be in those environments. And so we need to find those people. Once we find the people who see us as we are, then we only want to surround ourselves with those people.
So Brandon, I have a question for you that I would love for you to touch on for our listeners and our audience is, I know Mike's been sharing about all of these profound tools, and I know you've shared so many of these tools with me. Is there a tool that you would recommend to our listeners, like Mike was talking about exploring his values and branding, that some of our listeners could play around with and see how that aligns with the company that they might be working at now?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've evolved. I used to do, Mike mentioned brand work. I did tons of brand work. I've evolved brand work. And I think that's actually because of things like the social justice movements we've seen and the coming companies getting involved in social impact. I believe in identity, who we are. And to your point, Jennifer, it's rooted in values. So I think it all starts with values. They seem soft skills, but they're actually hard skills. So starting with, you can Google 10 core values, 20 core values, but I can send you a list. I have a list of the values I use, but understanding your core values and how you live your life through those values, I think is one of the best things you could. That's something you can do for yourself. Only you really know your values. Now, you can look externally and say, I aspire to be more like, and think about what values they have and certainly bring that forth. The other thing to do is, I think this is the most important thing, is it starts with goal, or as I think about it more now, goal was historically how I did it. Now I think about impact. What impact do you want to have in the world? What impact do you want to have on an organization? By the way, as we've said a million times in the show, you don't need to leave your company. You just need to grow in your company. You don't even need to get a new job. You just need to be more valued. And to do that, you have to create impact. So what kind of impact do you want to have? Aligning that obviously with your goal, thinking about values, and then certainly your strengths. We all have different strengths and weaknesses. I tend to be a strengths-based person. So really identifying that was easy with Mike, right? It was where he was not valuing his strengths. You know who did, Jennifer, funny enough, and this is the fourth tip maybe on this, is the people who you help know you best. Don't listen to the people who don't value what you bring in the world. Talk to the people who value what you bring most. People who don't value what you bring are never going to value it. They don't get it. They're never going to get it. Just make sure, don't be in business with them. But with Mike, when he left, Jennifer, there was the coolest thing they made him. It was, and I've done this for other clients since then. I've done this for friends. I've taken this and done this. But they wrote so many Mike Myles quotes. Slay the dragon. Mike, what are, give me two more that they said. What were other Milesisms?
There's like so many of them. I didn't even realize I said those things, but I'm going to give you two answers. And because it was always the truth and then the corporate line. And then there was, let me stop you right there. Let me I don't know.
Yeah.
I never paid attention enough to even know I said all those things. I'm like, what? These are things? I'm like, yeah, you say them all the time.
There were hundreds of them. And they were so good. There was little pearls of wisdom. That's it, Jennifer. What I do for people so often is I hear their wisdom and I mirror it back. If you don't work with Jennifer or Brandon, work with anyone. Just say, I'm going to say some stuff about what I do. What do you hear? And once you hear back what you do, you don't not want to do it anymore. I always talk about not giving other people your gifts. I describe it as going to a wedding, getting the best gift in the world, and then when you leave, go, I'm going to keep it for myself. That would be a rude move. All right, Mike, do me a favor. 1 minute. Take us around. It's easier with Jennifer. She's traveling the world, right? I love all the things Jennifer has done. By the way, I'm just going to tease her for 1 second. One of my favorite Jenniferisms is that she'll just be like, oh, my friend, Deepak Chopra. Maybe you've heard of him. Oh, I was just talking to my friend the other day, just casually. Michael Beckwith, started Agape, basically wrote The Secret. But, these friends. My friend's like a corporate lawyer. My friends are I'm honored to be one of your friends, Jennifer. I guess maybe I feel better by proximity. But anyway, non-sequitur. This is how awesome Jennifer is. Jennifer's friends are thought leaders because Jennifer's a thought leader. My geeked out thing on my dear friend Jennifer. So teasing, but also true. Mike, take us around the world, man, because you've been to China. Give us a few of the things that you've done since leaving that are pretty epic.
Oh, wow. I stopped keeping track because I'm just going, and I don't even keep a list. I'll share some with you, but I'm just waking up every day trying, the biggest thing I challenge myself to do is stay curious and follow that curiosity because it never stops leading me to interesting people and interesting places. And, that led me to Orlando to work with an amazing college down there called Full Sail University, which does an incredible job in preparing young people to enter into the workforce in the entertainment industry, and then becoming a mentor for so many of those graduates and helping them transition here into LA, which led me to working with the Los Angeles Film School as well and mentoring students from there, and helping those young people discover and stay aligned with their story helps inspire me. And as I get older, I get to tap into their brains and understand more about what young people are interested in, so I can stay, in sync with all the changes that are happening in the entertainment industry. But it also helps me stay aligned with my own story. So it's been such a gift to be able to give back in that way. And through one of those students, I was introduced with the largest streaming platform in China called iQIYI. They're essentially the Netflix of China. And they came to the North America to start producing shows and had several conversations with it. I don't speak Chinese or Mandarin. I had to hire translators, but I felt very honored. They selected me as their North American producer and worked with them on the shows that they've brought to North America that air back in China. Was invited to go to Beijing to go on set. So I went to Beijing for 2 weeks. We hiked the Great Wall together. It was amazing. I've helped open a broadcast studio here in Los Angeles. I've helped launch virtual events. I've produced concerts. I've done non-profit work for charities. I'm producing some corporate videos. A bit like I don't know. I've gone
No,
to
it's awesome.
Cannes Film Festival and produced the like. Anyways, I don't necessarily keep track of it, only because, you know, Brandon, since meeting you and kind of going through everything, like I'm just living in my alignment, and I'm just, you know, since I became aware of that, like it's not a thing anymore. And it also, just like I said earlier, like it just removes the anxiety of the things that aren't like in alignment. You know, I don't beat myself up for trying to like, well, shoot, that didn't work out like I thought. Like, well, it just wasn't for me. It's just not aligned with who I am. Let it go, move on, gravitate. If I stay curious, it leads me to interesting people. Those interesting people lead me to interesting conversations. 9 out of 10 times, those conversations evolve into something cool happening. And if we just come from a place of abundance, then that just attracts more abundance and more cool things. And so I just stay in that space and keep my faith in abundance.
Well, now you're speaking Jennifer's language. I'll turn it over to her because I know we're almost at time.
Yeah, no, I was just re-listening to that book from Marianne Williamson this morning. Hold on, because it's a great book. The Law of Divine Compensation.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. I mean, there's so many great authors and books, and I love, Mike, that you're a regular student of all of this. And I think the really important lesson cancel, something that is a teachable moment, perhaps, that we can all learn from Mike's story is that sometimes when you let go of something that no longer serves you, something 1,000 times better is waiting for you, and it might be uncomfortable. It's like that old adage of the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. It is freaking painful, man. You're like this little squiggly thing, and then you're like in there and you're struggling, and then you burst free, and then you have wings. What the heck? Like, who came up with that? That's freaking brilliant, by the way. So that's how we are as human beings. And your story, Mike, reminds me of a friend of mine, Moshe Gersht. And Moshe, we recently got introduced like maybe a month or two ago, and I had him on my show. And I loved his story. He grew up in LA and he was a rock star. Like, how many of us would want to be a rock star at 13 years old? Like, this kid is like playing, I forget the names of all those famous things, like the Troubadour or whatever it is, or the Roxy at 13 years old with these famous bands. However, despite the fame and doing the Vans tour, whatever it was, he didn't feel like it was in his heart. Who gives up a music contract and, you know, playing with the best people around the world? And you know what he did? He went spiritual. He's like, no, I want to have a family. I think his wife has their 5th child on the way. And he just published his book and it hit all the bestseller lists. So how do you give up a career on one thing and go, oh my gosh, am I willing? You know, we hold on so tightly to the thing that we think we want, but it doesn't align with our values. And the moment that we release it, it's kind of like that old analogy of the raccoon. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but something that always stuck with me is if you give a raccoon a piece of a mirror, and the raccoon has to stick its hand in a box to grab the piece of the mirror and it can see it, it will hold on to the mirror even though it can't pull its little hand back out until it dies, because it thinks that's what it wants. Let's not be like that with our jobs. Let's trust the Mikes of the world. Let's trust the Brandons of the world and the Moshes, that it's okay to let go of that shiny object that we think is the thing we want in order to receive the thing we need.
Boom. That was good, Jennifer. You're in a roll today. You're in a roll today. I'm
when I met Brandon, I was that raccoon. And I was trying so hard to just like, why isn't this working? Why can't I be happy? Why can't I just make this? And he's like, maybe you're supposed to let go. And I'm like, but letting go is scary. And he's like, yeah, but there's so much more out there. And I quickly discovered that.
That's right, Mike. And I think an untethered life is sometimes what we need before we can tether again to what we're meant to be tethered to, which is family, life, career, Moisha, Jennifer's stories. There's nothing, I think it's scary to let go in general. You, Mike, you say that, man, but you're more of I have so many Mike-isms in my lifetime, but when I met you, I think you thought you were leaving something. But I tell every client who will listen to me now, don't walk away from something, walk towards something. Don't walk away from something, walk towards something. And I believe in my heart, man, that you were the inspiration for that idea that I shared thousands of times, which is, yeah, we thought you were walking away from something. You weren't. You were walking towards who you were and who you're meant to be. Jennifer, I know you've done that, and you've done that through learning and talks and listening. And I've done that through suffering and pain, but I did that from someone holding up a mirror and saying, you only see the ugly. What is why? What is it? And it's like, because I am. And, having someone hold up that mirror for the fraud that I was, to tell myself all that negativity and let in no positivity when I was sprouting positivity. The point is that go towards. So that's what we ask of our audience. That's what we ask for anyone. Reach out to Make Better Myles on LinkedIn. Mike Myles, you can find him anywhere. He's one of my gurus.
Wow, thank you. And can I just add that like, and I know, I know people who are still in the arena and still trying to make it work. There's still that raccoon, and I was too. And I think it's easy to find ourselves in that situation. And I don't even assume that I wouldn't find myself in that situation again. Meaning I don't take it for granted. I think it's daily mindfulness to stay aligned. And I think something that, if to those who are listening who are in that arena and they're still trying to make it work, my heart goes out, because there's some of the most amazing, hardworking, incredible people who will go to the ends of the earth to make a situation work, maybe that needs to get let go of, and they just haven't arrived at that place yet. But, letting go, as you put it, makes the space for something new. And, I celebrate those people who are still in the arena working at it, because it's a testament to who they are, their commitment, and their drive. And my heart goes out to them.
And sometimes it takes courage, every day to show up and to do something. It's different types of courage for different opportunities that we experience in our life. And so to all the people out there who maybe today you still showed up to work, that takes freaking courage, man. Maybe you hate your boss. Maybe you feel unfulfilled and not aligned with your values, but whatever it took for you to show up to support yourself, to support your family, whoever it is, I acknowledge you. We're not saying go out there and blow your job off or your boss off tomorrow. We're asking you just to get curious, to ask yourself, is this what matters to me? Is this what I'm meant to do? There's a great quote by, I think it was Howard Thurman, that says, don't ask yourself what don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and then go and do that, because what this world needs is people who have come alive. And so that's what I leave everybody with today. Ask yourself, as you go out into your work week, as you go out into this month, what makes you come alive? And if it's not that job, hire a Brandon, go find a friend, find a mentor. There are so many great resources out there, and explore what makes you come alive. Even put a pen to paper and just ask yourself that question. So thank you so much, Mike. Thank you, Brandon. Any closing thoughts, gentlemen?
I adore you both, and I'm grateful to be thought partners and friendships with you both. And to our audience, just because you're stuck today doesn't mean it's not serving you. There's purpose in it. But God, when you get unstuck, I wish you Godspeed behind you, because it really does feel like the wind's at your back and nothing can stop you, and you'll never be stuck again.
Thank you both for having me on. All I can say is, no matter what age you're at, if you're feeling like you're twisting yourself into a pretzel to make your circumstance work, find a coach. I never had one before I met Brandon, and I wish I'd found one 25 years earlier, because he just became an incredible sparring partner, somebody to challenge my thinking and help get me realigned to the things that I had forgotten about myself.
Brilliant, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our listeners out there. This show is for you. As much as we enjoy hearing ourselves talk and like riffing with each other, the only reason we do this is, it's funny, some of you might not even realize this, but for the last year or so that I was living in London and Paris and Portugal, I was doing the show at midnight every single night, or every single Monday that we host it. And it's because I love this, because there's nothing I'd rather do than to be here and to have, if one of you today perhaps had an aha moment, and you had that moment, you realized something that maybe will help you to get one step closer to living your purpose, your passion, and waking up feeling fulfilled. then this is all worth it. No matter how many hours we spend doing this, it's all worth it. So thank you for being here with us. Thank you for playing in this space. If you want to catch this episode later, it's on iHeartRadio, it's on iTunes, all under Get Yourself the Job. You can also find us on YouTube. If you prefer to watch things on YouTube, we're uploading all of these videos, just making it as convenient as possible. And one thing, if you ever want to help support us, we would love it if you would leave us ratings. Ratings help us to rank higher and to be able to help more people. And that's what we're here to do. And that's how we get to make the biggest difference. So thank you so much for being here with us and wishing everybody. Oh, Brandon, did you have something?
Shout out to LA Talk Radio. You can find them on their Facebook page and their own website. LA Talk Radio, Ronan, Sam, the people behind it are just all amazing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the LA Talk Radio, of course, Facebook page, that's what's so amazing is that Sam and Ronan and the team put this all together so that you can now watch us live. Some people do better with visuals. So feel free, to the best of our ability, we always interact live during the show, or we'll get to your comments after the show. So we love to hear from you. And you can also email us at getyourselfthejob@gmail.com. Thank you so much for being here with us.
You're listening to Get Yourself the Job with Jennifer Hill and Brandon Maslan.